You've earned the points, you got your dream destination in mind, so you go and search for that award flight and you get lost. Suddenly you realize your credit card has over a dozen different airline partners, making you wonder questions like which website do you even look at, is this a good price, and a million other questions that you just have to guess, and inevitably you lead to the point where you're wondering if you're wasting your points. Now this is that confusing part of award travel that no one likes to talk about, and honestly, it's the make it or break it moment that separates people who get the good deals from those who don't. Now luckily it's gotten much easier thanks to award search tools to find some of these good deals. Award search tools are tools that help you search multiple airline websites for you and create a simple, tidy list of flights that you can actually book with your points. Contrary to what you might think, they are not a cure-all. These tools all have major blind spots to be aware of, and there are other strategies to use in conjunction with these tools to truly get the best deals. Now, a little while ago, I was a guest on the Bougie in a Backpack podcast where I broke down some of these exact strategies that I'm talking about. I wanted to share that part of the conversation with you. So let's jump into that real quick and then we'll come back here and wrap things up.
What are some tools that you like to use to find these really good flight deals using those flexible points?
Yeah, so there's really 3 tools that I use most often. The main one I really use is pointsya.com. That's one of my favorites. There's other tools that are similar to it. Roam, Travel, and Award Tool are 2 other ones that I see used often. They work very similarly. They're kind of like a point A to point B search engine, essentially kind of Google Flights-esque. You type in where you're flying from, where you want to fly to, put in the dates you want to go in. Sometimes you're able to search multiple dates at a time, and then it'll just spit out, within 15, 20 seconds or so, a bunch of different award flights that you could book on those dates. And I like it, and I really recommend it for newcomers because it does let you filter by the type of points you use or the airline program you want to use. They have all kinds of different kinds of filters to search for economy, business class flights. And so that's one tool that I really like to use. And I like to say I recommend that if you've got a very strict and simple itinerary, like, oh, I've got a trip coming up next week that I need a flight for, want to see if I can use my points. Just pop it in there real quick. It'll tell you what's available. And then you can kind of figure out, should I pay cash or should I not? And so that's one tool I like to use. Then do you want me to go?
Yeah. So I guess if you're ready for the more advanced tools, like what other tools do you like to use? Or just like search strategies that you use for like maybe like airline websites that might be more helpful than others to find award availability?
Airline websites is still important because that's something that newcomers can fall into a trap of, is using these award search tools, but not knowing where their blind spots are. They're getting more and more partners every day, but most of them still struggle to really identify Avios airline partners award availability. So those are airlines like British Airways, Iberia, Qatar, Finnair, Aer Lingus. And so you can miss a lot of those flights to Europe, which they could be a great source of the cheapest flights to get to Europe sometimes. You can get clues on some of these tools as far as if availability might be there and kind of save you some time in that way. And then you can go search on that website. For instance, I like to use Points, even though it doesn't really search many of the Avios airlines. I like to use it and filter down for Qantas Airlines. And Qantas tends to have a lot of one world availability that Alaska Airlines, American Airlines, or other partners don't have. And so if it's available on Qantas, then more than likely it might be available on British Airways or Qatar or Finnair, especially if it's a nonstop flight. I realize Qatar and Finnair tends to have more nonstop routes available versus any connecting flights. And so that's kind of one way how I use award search tools and their flaws to my advantage, essentially, is you really have to understand kind of the airline alliances and kind of make some inferences. You're not right all the time, but it could definitely help save some time because some of those Avios airline websites are such a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
I hate the Qatar's pending page every single time. So
yeah. And then you have to log in and have all the logins for those. And it's like, it's important to make those accounts, but like, it's nice to be able to use those tools where you can just quickly search, but not have to like go in every single time.
Exactly. Yeah. 2-factor authentication. It's the best thing ever. And it's the bane of my existence at the same time because fraud is real. People get their points stolen all the time. So definitely do recommend doing the 2-factor authentication, get the text message, put in the code, but it still sucks.
Yeah, totally. So do you have any recommendations for like thinking about routes when it comes to transfer partners, or like if you're thinking about what your home airport is, like how you find the best flights if you have maybe a tricky situation?
So that's honestly kind of the most difficult thing for newcomers also to figure out is like, oh, they hear all these different sweet spot redemptions that we talk about on podcasts and videos and whatnot, but they're like, this doesn't work for me. I can't find it whenever I search it on whatever tool. And that's kind of the big issue. Like, in order to use these tools effectively and find the really best deals that everyone talks about, you got to know what routes they're flying on. And so that's when I use a tool called flightconnections.com. And so it's a free tool if you haven't heard of it. And there's just a lot of ads because it's free. And there is a paid subscription if you wanted to get rid of the ads and get some other features. I don't use the paid features. I just use the free version. But essentially, it's a flightconnections.com. You plug in your home airport. It'll tell you what destinations you can fly to nonstop. And then what I really like to use it for is if I'm using it to help someone book a flight or to figure out for someone else, you know, what options you really have, is filter it by airline. Like if you want to use, Finnair has a great redemption from the West Coast, like 62,000 points all the way to Helsinki from LAX or whatever West Coast airports they fly from. And if I can't remember what West airports they fly from, you can just put in Finnair, filter that as the airline. It'll show you all the different routes that airline flies to and from. So you'll see a bunch of flights to and from Helsinki, and it'll show you LAX, Seattle are the two airports that they fly from the US, and then the other US airports as well. And so I think Flight Connections is a very underrated tool that not a lot of people talk about. It's a very simple function. Like, that's all it does. It doesn't help you find any award flight availability at all, but it does let you kind of fine tune that search and kind of, you know, not just kind of guessing, but more like a educated, estimated guess, and narrow down that whole search process.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. I love using Flight Connections, and I think it's just like, I like using it for seeing what days, because sometimes there's flight routes that are only on certain days, and you might look on Google Flights just to see what's available, and you're like, oh, I guess there's no direct flight, but there is, maybe just not on that day.
Yeah, very true, very true. That's a feature I do not use that often, but is very useful.
Yeah. So when you're using Flight Connections, do you typically search from the destination that you're trying to go to, or that you're trying to book for someone, or do you look more from the home airport? Like, or do you do both?
I do both. I do try to figure out if there's anything from the home airport to that destination. And honestly, if it's a smaller airport like Austin, we technically have direct flights to Frankfurt, Amsterdam, and London. Besides London, finding flights direct to Amsterdam and to Frankfurt for a super great price, like on a Star Alliance or One World member, it's very hard. And so that's what I find for the most part. If you're flying from a smaller airport, with some exception, it's going to be hard to find that nonstop flight to Europe. However, I will work backwards from the destination to figure out what US airports might be best to reposition to from the home airport. And then I also look at the home airport to figure out what nonstop domestic flights are there to book from. Because if I try to fly from, I can't think of a good example right now, like from Austin, and my sweet spot is in Atlanta, but there's really not many nonstop flights from Austin to Atlanta, then I'm kind of screwed, because I'm going to end up with a connecting flight for my positioning flight, and then it's just too much in one redemption at that point. So I do like to use both and kind of fine tune my searching from there. I also like to figure out which lounges or which airports have the lounges I have access to.
Yeah, especially for the layovers. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, so I figure out what destination in Europe and see all the different US airports, and it's like, okay, which one of those has a Capital One lounge or a Sapphire lounge? And it's like, okay, that's where I want my positioning flight to be from, and see if I can find anything from there, so I can prioritize my search there as well.
Yeah. So which lounges are your favorite, and what's your method of getting access to them?
So what are my favorite airport lounges? Well, for that, you'll have to watch the full podcast episode with Mackenzie from Bougie in a Backpack. I'll link that in the description down for you below. Be sure to check out their platform. They have a lot of good resources for points and miles travelers. And within our podcast episode, there's more nuggets for the beginner award traveler as well. But the three most important takeaways from this specific video is that first, award search tools are your best friend for shortening that learning curve and finding the award flights you want. But second, you have to know their blind spots. Use tricks like the Qantas search to get hints for obvious availability that the tools might miss otherwise. Third, since many of those best deals are often on specific routes, use flightconnections.com to work backward and figure out what those routes are and which are the smartest airports to fly from. And now remember, I mentioned that Poinsettia is a fantastic tool whenever you have a specific date or a very narrow range of dates. But what if you're completely flexible? What if you're willing to go wherever you can get the absolute best deal? Searching day by day for a month-long period in Poinsettia would take a while. For this specific task, I like to use a different tool called Seats.Arrow. It's built to scan huge ranges of dates and data instantly to find the lowest price awards for you. I talk about this tool and how to use it regularly within this playlist linked here, so be sure to browse around and look at the videos that interest you. My name is Michael with Nurse Michael Travels. I'll see you in the next one.